Welcome, welcome. We have a special treat for you all today. We have America Ferrera, who many of you know and have seen her journey and have seen her in a lot of different roles, but she's an award-winning Golden Globe, Emmy winner, Screen Actors Guild Award, as well as Alma en Imagen award winner, activist, actor, director, but most importantly, one of our big culture icons. So thank you, America, for being here. We are so excited to have you be part of LTX Fest. And today's dialogue is really going to be about how do we own our narrative and power, but also our vote. So with that said, we just wanted to say, welcome, welcome. So excited to have you here. How are you doing?
Hi, Lili. I'm so good. Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be speaking to this incredible group of Latinos who are, poised to change the world and to make things better for our community. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here with us. And so what would be great is to, let's get right into it. We know that we are in challenging times, right? And we also know that the power that sharing our story also has, and you've been a big inspiration to our community. And more specifically, given your roles that you've been in, how do we reimagine what Latinx representation in media, entertainment, and tech and civic engagement specifically this year entail, given that we're facing multiple pandemics across health, racial justice, and democracy? What is the opportunity from you that you see for us to seize in these challenging times?
Yeah, they are challenging times and challenging for our community that has bared the brunt of a lot of what this pandemic has simply magnified. The inequities and the difficulty within our community to access education, healthcare, equal pay, good jobs, safety on the jobs, representation, and you name it. The most basic rights, to live and breathe and not have our children caged, to access democracy as Americans in this country. So, we have borne the brunt for many decades in this country. And the special opportunity I see now, I don't know that the opportunity is special to this moment, but I feel like what this moment is highlighting is that our opportunity is community. Our opportunity is coming together. It's so funny that a pandemic that essentially made us, stay apart and come away from each other is leaving us with the lesson of how important it is for us to have community and to be in community and to grow stronger together and to grow courage from one another. And that's why I jumped at the opportunity of being in this conversation with you, to be able to speak with thousands of Latinos who are out there on a day-to-day basis thinking of solutions and ways to address the challenges in our community. I mean, that's all there is. All we have is one another and our life experiences and how those experiences inform our solutions for our community. And so, I've had the privilege of being an involved citizen for many years, whether it's on the ground, knocking on doors, registering voters, turning out voters, or, in the rooms where Time's Up was beginning as a movement. And what I have witnessed, whether it's, in a detention center in McAllen, Texas, or whether it's in, Hollywood with the most famous and richest people that you can imagine, nothing is possible without each other. Nothing is possible without community, without relationship, without us coming physically together, coming into proximity with one another and giving each other the courage that it takes to change things, to change deeply ingrained systems that were designed to oppress. So the challenges are great, but there's also never been more of us in this country. And now the opportunity and the challenge is, how do we unify? How do we create more spaces that include more of us? How do we find representation in one another and just find ways to come together and not feel isolated from each other's experiences.
Definitely, and I think you hit such the reason why LTX Fest is taking place specifically this year is our hashtag United We Rise. And I think that if there's any time that has showed us how important it is to have really well functioning public systems for the private sector, but in general, I think going back to connecting as humans, right? And I think you touch another big point from there and I'll share a little bit of my personal story of how being an immigrant, right? I immigrated from Bolivia when I was 6 years old, and my mom was a single mom with 2 daughters, and just seeing her work 2 to 3 jobs, so then that way I can have a place here and be able to go to college. And actually, I'm also a USC alumni, so I know some roots there.
Right on. This is just
right on. And I saw it like firsthand how the power that technology had to change my life, right? Just by being able to get exposed and be able to have an opportunity. But I also, when I started seeing some of those headlines of the families being separated, it really broke me, because that could have been just me. The difference between me and those kids and those families was that I had a paper. And so I always look at that and think about who is setting these rules and how do we, especially being in my position, take the opportunity now, right? And that's why we're here. And we're here with thousands of folks tuning into this specific discussion who may have had that vision of what an American dream could entail. But now as we're seeing, especially seeing some of the systemic barriers, does an American dream really exist? What's your definition specifically of the American dream? And what are some statistics or challenges that you've overcome that maybe a lot of folks may not even be aware of?
Well, as you speak about your background and your mother and immigrating from Bolivia, my parents are from Honduras, but I experienced the exact same journey of, my mother and father came to this country to give their children, the next generation, an opportunity that they didn't see possible in Honduras. And my mother was very quickly a single mother of 6 children, struggling to keep the lights on. Sometimes they weren't on. Struggling to keep the water running. Sometimes it wasn't running, struggling to keep us fed and in school and chasing our dreams. I mean, that's what they came here for. They came here for the opportunity, and there was nothing they weren't willing to do. There was no job that was too low for them. There was no amount, there weren't enough hours in the day for them to express their dreams for us through the hard work that they did to afford that. And that's something that I think so many Latinos share. While we, come to this country because our parents came as immigrants, I think we grow up sort of in between. I had the pleasure of editing an anthology called American Like Me, which was a collection of personal essays from first generation kids and also indigenous young people from all walks of life, from countries in Africa and Asia and Latin America, talking about that first generation experience of what it means to take on all of your parents' sacrifices as your path, to know that you have so much to fulfill and so much to live up to. And oftentimes doing it feeling very alone, feeling like, I'm not American enough for Americans and I'm not Latino enough for Latinos. So where do I belong? And my answer eventually to that question was build community, which is why I wanted to make American Like Me, to say to us, we are not alone in what you're experiencing. You are not alone. There are millions like you with any given experience you're having. And if we could just find community, if we could reach out, if we could find the touch points that connect us and make our experiences so alike, we can find courage in that. And in terms of what does the American dream mean to me, it's complicated. It's, anybody who's paying attention knows how complicated it is, especially when many of us, what's the alternative for me? The alternative for me is that I'd be living in Honduras, where women and activists are murdered for speaking out. Where migrants are fleeing by the thousands, people are sending their children away from a country that is, so corrupt that a parent's best choice is to send their child on a treacherous journey and never see them again. Imagine that being your best option.
Yeah.
You know, so when I think about the privilege of being in this country and what it has afforded me and what it gives me in my life, you know, it's a complicated one because I feel the privilege of being an American, but I also feel the disappointment of the promise of America versus the reality of America. And that is something that I grapple with every day. Of, you know, I know that I am a product of believing in the American dream. But I don't even know myself what that means, you know, because I made it, but my career and my path is a rarity. And that doesn't make me feel proud. That makes me feel awful that millions and millions like me will never have the opportunity to have their talent be met with opportunity. And so that's what drives me. And I think that that's what drives so many of us, whether we're in tech or whether we're in entertainment or business or whatever it is. You can't come from the places we come from without thinking about all the people who don't get the opportunities that we get. And there's a responsibility inherent in that to make more room and create more access to the dream, to try and actually make the reality fit the promise of what it means to be in this country and to have had your parents or grandparents sacrifice everything they knew so that you could have access to it.
Yeah, you touch upon so many things that I think a lot of us have felt across sectors, right? Sometimes being the only one, especially even right now, and the representation of Latinx in tech to Latinx in entertainment media are actually on par, right? And so it kind of makes us question, like, can you be what you can't see? And how do we change that when a lot of the times you're forced to be the first person, right? But what is also the privilege that comes with it? And I think that's why today is really special, because for the folks who are listening, this is really our call to action to all of you all who have the privilege, and especially the ones that have been able to be part of this tech economy, to really find out how can we be more active in our advocacy. Civic engagement is no longer a nice to have, this is a must have. So on that end, America, what would it look like? I know I've read a lot about all the civic engagement advocacy work you're doing. It's so important because you have such an important platform for us, and especially being able to be in historic marches, right? You spoke at the Historic Women's March and also different presidential political conventions and beyond. And so on that note, what would a President Ferrera entail? Like if you had an opportunity to create a Latinx manifesto, so for the next 4 years, what are the key priorities and changes that you would like all of us to rally around and unite like we've never done before?
Well, the best news is that we don't have to be president to have that dream, and we don't have to be president to make the changes that we want to see. You know, for me, I started engaging with Latinos around elections over a decade ago, and it was usually around a certain campaign or a certain candidate. And when I got on the ground, what I realized is it's going to take so much more than one candidate and one election to truly empower our community, to truly change what stops us from engaging. And one of the biggest barriers is the story that is told about us and the story that we believe about ourselves. We look at mainstream culture and mostly we're invisible. You know, the latest research shows we're 18% of the population, we're 4% of representation on screen. And when we are there, we're portrayed as the same 5 awful, harmful stereotypes. So that story that gets told about us and to us, and that you can't help but believe about yourself somewhere deep down, is a massive barrier to our empowerment. And so the stories and the opportunity to tell our stories is, to me, I see as one of the most crucial things that needs to change for us to be truly empowered as a community, to know and understand the power and the potential that lies with us. And we can do that through entertainment. We do that through politics. We do that through technology and business and science and medicine and all of it. We are all collectively always telling the story. And you know, the thing that I think is so beautiful is, you know, each of us on our own individual path to fulfilling our dreams, we're paving that path for ourselves, but we're paving it for so many behind us. But if they can't see us doing it, it almost doesn't matter, right? We have to be able to see ourselves, see our contributions, lift each other up, and to tell our story. So I think that the cultural piece of this is huge, and it is what drove the founding of Se Puede, which we can talk about, you know, a little bit later on. But you know, to answer your question about, you know, what would I want to see changed, you know, the truth of the matter is that, I mean, there are 32 million eligible Latino voters in this election. That means that after white voters, Latinos are the biggest voting bloc in this country. That is power. That is real power. And what stops us from being able to use that power are the barriers that stand between us and showing up. The system, the voting system, our electoral system, it is not perfect. It is far from perfect. It is built to benefit those who can access it. So what we need to do is to increase our access to democracy. And only from that position can we begin to make it better, to change it. So showing up is so important. And for all of my Latinas out there, Latinas alone can be the deciding vote in 2020. When you look at the way that our election system works, the states that are the path towards victory or defeat on election night run through the states where Latinas are the largest growing cohort. That's not just Florida and Arizona and the states you naturally think of Latinos being in. That's states like North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. We are everywhere, and we are gaining power, but demography is not destiny. And for us to see the potential of our power be played out, we've got to show up. And we've got to start addressing all of the reasons that keep us from participating in our full power.
And that power is what we're unlocking. This is, especially as a Latina, for all the folks I know, we're like, yeah, but we gotta show up. It's not just about, you know, getting excited. And so I'm just reminding the folks to make sure you show up. And especially now with the COVID and the pandemic, and even in this format, right, the way we're connecting, technology has become such an everyday part of our life, just to even share information, access healthcare, access a lot of these information about what's even on the ballot, right? And so from your perspective, for maybe some of the folks who are kind of like, oh, I don't know about tech, I've heard all this stuff about tech, why, if you can speak to those specific folks, how do we encourage them to also see tech as an opportunity to mobilize in times like this, but also what would you call out on tech? So then that way we also are not just consuming, but being aware of how we're leveraging it.
Well, you know, I don't know that I'm an expert to speak on technology because I'm just learning how to like work Zoom, right? But I'm not a tech expert. But what I do know is what you just said, which is tech is a part of our everyday lives and becomes an opportunity for organizing. It becomes an opportunity for community. I mean, it's what's allowing even a platform like Se Puede to exist. It's what's allowing thousands of us right now to be talking to each other, engaging with one another. And, you know, our community cannot be left behind and left out of the thing that is changing the world rapidly, the thing that is changing how we communicate, what we communicate, how we build power. We have to be a part of that. And, you know, one of the most troubling, you know, aspects of what's come out of this election is misinformation that is targeted to our community. So technology is being weaponized against our community. We have to have representation in technology to be able to just combat that, combat the weaponization of technology against our communities, and really we are going to be the ones who know best how our community needs technology, how our community uses technology. And from everything I hear, you know, Latinos, young Latinos, which is to say the majority of Latinos in this country, we are younger than the average American. We over-index on mobile devices. We over-index in technology. So we're consuming it the way that we are one of the largest consumers of Hollywood films, but we are not represented in it. And that has to change. So, you know, we've got to break down these barriers for generations to come. And so pursuing that career in technology, committing to breaking down whatever barrier you can on the path to fulfilling your dream, you should know that you're not just paving your own path. You're paving the path for more people than you could even imagine.
Definitely. And I think especially in the sense of how tech could unite us, and the content that gets created is so important, as well as owning the platform. So with that said, I know Se Puede was launched, and you launched it alongside Eva Longoria, Monica Ramirez, and many other Latina leaders as well. Please share a little bit of the story of how you came to collaborate, and especially why this time?
Yeah, I think Eva and I, along with 8 other incredible women in activism, organizing, politics, business, technology, we came together to say, you know, how are we going to build power in our communities? Because no one is doing it for us. Because no candidate, no political party, they're thinking about how to show up 2 months before an election and get our vote in the most transactional ways possible. They're not thinking about long-term empowerment of the Latino community. And to really change the story for Latinos in this country, we started with culture, and for Latinas specifically, you know, the truth is that we are out there contributing in the most essential ways possible. You should know as a Latino that while we are 18% of the population in America, we are 34% of essential workers during this pandemic. That means we are holding this country up. We are keeping food on tables across America. You know, we are essential. We know this, or rather, it is a fact, but it isn't the story that is told to us. So we don't know it the way that we should know it, and the way everybody else should know it. Aside from the hardest jobs possible, being out on the fields, picking food, you know, we're doctors, we're teachers, we're lawyers, we're entertainers, we're athletes, we're politicians, we're business owners, we're entrepreneurs, we're tech experts. We are all of these things, contributing all the time. And those stories are not told. So even though we are out there being powerful, we can't see each other being powerful. And therefore we remain isolated, and we remain feeling alone. And you can't build power that way. So we need to reflect back to ourselves the power that we have, and the contributions that we are making. And so much about Se Puede is about celebrating us, celebrating the power that we already have, and the badassery of our communities everywhere. You know, the story you told about your mom, it's like, how many of us have a story about our mom or our grandma or our tias or our sisters who worked day and night doing the impossible, things that other people could never even imagine, overcoming challenges that other people couldn't even think of, so that we could, you know, follow our dreams. We are, you know, chingonas, we are badasses, there's nothing we can't handle. And that spirit, that fighting spirit, I think is what defines our community. And so we need to claim that and make it a celebration of our joy, and find ways to be joyful, because if we don't celebrate ourselves, no one else is going to celebrate us.
Exactly. And I think that's such a beautiful story of how to own and celebrate, especially in the times where all these headlines that we keep hearing keep tackling at us in different ways. And I think for Se Puede, I'm a fan. I follow it on the IG and everything. How can folks discover it, and how do we get more of the community members here plugged in?
Well, follow us on Instagram for sure at @she_se puede. And you know what's so amazing is like we launched and we already have over 80,000 people following us, and it just speaks to the need, right? That's the most important thing. Being a Latina in Hollywood, the majority of my career, which is about 20 years long now, I was always the only one in the room. I mean, I was, I'm always the only Latina producer or the only Latina director in the room or the only Latina in the cast. And just like in any other job, that is a lonely position to be in. And we get trained to think about other Latinas or Latinos in the industry as our competition, as if we've got to fight each other for the small piece of the pie, for the job, for the role, instead of thinking of each other as our allies, thinking of each other as our power, as our community. And that has begun to shift because Latinas in the industry have started saying, forget that. Like, no one's winning when we think of each other as competition. When we come into relationship with each other, when we just started a thing called like Latinas Who Lunch, and we just like invited a bunch of Latinas in a room to say, what is stopping us from being with each other? What is stopping us from knowing each other, learning from each other, commiserating with each other, building power, making plans, working together? Things have really begun to shift for Latinos in Hollywood because we have dared to be with each other in different ways. And I think that is true for Latinos in any industry, is we've got to find each other. We have to celebrate each other. We have to lift each other up, because one of us making it doesn't mean anything. It's a token. We have to, in order to make real change in our community, there's got to be a wave of opportunity coming to our community. And so that's the spirit of Se Puede, which is, if you rise, I rise. And that energy that we felt as Latinas in Hollywood or Latinas in activism, of what it finally feels like to not be the only one in the room, that feeling of empowerment that you can't explain, we wanted to bottle that up and like give that to all of us. We all deserve that. We deserve to be in community. And that's how Se Puede was born. What is the community that will give us all the feeling of, I'm not alone. I have support, and I'm a badass. And so are my sisters, and so are my Latino brothers. And we can do this together by uniting and by celebrating each other.
That's why the theme for this year's LTX Fest is United We Rise, because I think you're bringing forth a lot of the different similarities that we see in tech, and even for some of the members are in part of the investment community, right? A lot of the times it's been normalized that we're like the only ones, but the reality is that we also need to make sure that we're not just the only ones, but we're bringing in the next generation, getting to the C-suite, becoming boards, becoming owners across the entire pipeline and ecosystem. And what brings me hope is that youth. It's the next generation that is looking at us, that is discussing, that feels so empowered. And so with that said, what brings you hope currently right now in 2020? What is something that you, when you wake up in the morning, you're like, this is why, and this is the hope?
I mean, to be honest, it's, my children. I have a 2-year-old son and I have a 5-month-old daughter. And, we don't have the luxury of being bogged down in despair. Like, when you have the next generation to think of, you have to think about, what the joy you're bringing into their life. And it's no different from what our parents did for us. They were, I will never face the challenges that my parents faced or what their parents faced before them. But what I experience as a parent is that feeling of, no matter what else is going on, the next generation only has us to set up the world that they're going to inherit. And so, yes, it's always the future that it's always the future and the next generation that gives us all hope. And the thing, I wanted to say, going back to, being the only person in the room, is that, with each generation, our dreams get to evolve. We get to expect more. You know, our parents came here and what they wanted for us was pretty basic, right? They wanted us to survive. They wanted us to get an education, to have access to a good job, to not have to struggle on a day-to-day basis. And when we get to have that privilege, then it's our responsibility to think about what's next. That the dream shouldn't just be about getting in the room, but who do we get to be when we're in the room? Who do I have to become to be in the room? And once I'm in the room, once I'm in a position of power, what am I doing with that power? Because just being in a position of power doesn't make it better for everyone else. You know, being in a position of power and making decisions from your experience, from your knowledge of what our community actually needs is what makes a difference. And so for everybody who's, you know, thinking about designing tech or you know, tech is solutions. That's what tech is. And what I would say is bring your whole self to your work. Don't shed pieces of your life and your experience to fit into a room, because then it's as if you weren't in that room. When you have to shed your identity to be present. Once you're in that position of power, once you have the opportunity to design solutions and to design things that connect us and communicate us, bring your whole self, bring everything you know about your family, your community, what their needs are, how they think, how they use technology, because those are the solutions that are going to change things for us when we can show up in places of power as our full selves.
I'm gonna snap the fingers because I'm like, I'm ready. I am fired up. And that's, I think that's a part why we're all also with LTX so excited to be able to bring up these narratives in different ways, but also at large scales, right? And being able to share it through technology in our way, in our voices. And especially at the Kapor Center where I work, we focus on the distance traveled. That's your magic sauce, that's the part that it's where the innovation is really gonna come from. And so I am so excited to have had this opportunity to be in discussion with you, to help empower, unlock all the geniuses across all the sectors, because as you said, we're all here and united together, we'll definitely be able to build, not just rebuild, but like build something bottoms up in a way that's really reflective of our values in our community and for the long term. Thank you, America, so much for joining us. This was such a great time. Is there anything else that you would like to say? Any last call to action to the folks?
You know, join us at Se Puede on Instagram and join our community. Come, you know, celebrate us, celebrate our joy. And also every single one of us needs to take it on as our own responsibility to make sure that every Latino we know is showing up to vote, that they, you know, and don't even think about outside your home. Like, who's in your home? Your sisters, your brothers, your roommates, your cousins, your tios, like your parents. It's more effective for somebody to hear from their brother, sister, or friend, or daughter or son, have you voted? Do you have a plan to vote? Are you going to vote? Do you know your vote matters? Do you know what's at stake? That is many more times impactful than I'm America Ferrera and I want you to vote. It doesn't mean anything. You are the most powerful communicator and the most powerful influencer for the people in your life. So use that power and use that platform and know that in this election, everything is at stake for all of us, but particularly for our community, because we have been suffering and it can and will get worse for us if this election doesn't have consequences for the people who have treated our community with such disregard.
Definitely. So with that said, everybody get out and vote. Call your mom, your tia. My mom already has her mail-in ballot. She texted me the picture. She's like, I'm ready to go. What do I vote on? So we're actually going to have like a dinner party to go through what's on the California state ballot. And so I want to encourage folks to know what's up. There's so much at stake, especially this year, not just at the presidential level, but also at every single level. So please take the time to learn. We'll have more resources also shared out at LTX Fest, at Se Puede. There's so many also amazing partners to be able to mobilize stronger, and we have to show up. This is our time to own and show our power and unity. So thank you all for joining. Thank you so much, America.
Thank you, Lily. I love you all. I love us. and we are gonna, we are gonna grow. We're gonna come out on top. I know it.
Yes, yes, we will. She se puede.
Se puede, sí se puede, sí se puede.
Great, thank you.